Welcome to episode 48 of the Tax Professionals podcast. Kate Rothwell, Head of Tax at AO, joins us for episode 6 of Tax Career Success Secrets, where experienced tax professionals share the secrets behind their career success. This episode in particular has a focus on dealing with shyness, returning to work after maternity leave, and achieving the work-life balance you want in roles of all seniority.
Welcome to the Tax Professionals podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you improve your tax career. Here's your host, Jack Bonehill.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode where I'm joined by Kate Rothwell, in-house Head of Tax at AO. Kate started off her tax career at Grant Thornton before moving to industry in 2010, where she's stayed ever since. Kate's journey to this point is somewhat unorthodox, and she's a prime example that you can achieve what you want out of your career by being true to yourself and by sticking to your values. She's also a great example of how to have kids and a successful tax career. Outside of her employment, she co-chairs the National In-House Retail Tax Discussion Group and supports the Northern Women in Tax Group. She is incredibly passionate about supporting women in tax and is a big advocate for raising awareness around the menopause to improve work for women who are at this point in their lives. Kate described herself as a shy person, and this is something she's had to manage throughout her career, and she has done it with success. You will hear in the episode how she's done this. Our conversation starts off by talking about Kate's career and her journey to in-house Head of Tax at AO, before moving on to Kate's experience of going back to work after having kids. We then move on to how Kate dealt with being the only in-house tax professional for her employer, and a wider discussion about her approach to running an in-house tax team. Kate then shares with us how she's achieved a work-life balance whilst holding senior roles, and also an unexpected standout piece of advice that she's received. Our conversation ends with Kate leaving us with the advice that she would give to her younger self, knowing what she knows now, and also her advice for progressing, developing and improving your tax career. The timings for each of these sections can be found in the show notes at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP48 or in the details section of the episode within your podcast player. The show notes also include all the other links mentioned within this episode. You can find all other episodes of Tax Career Success Secrets by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TCSS. TCSS stands for Tax Career Success Secrets. The most recent episode before this one is with Jenny Brown, who became tax partner at 35 and who has a focus on nurturing and developing her team. Make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes of the podcast by subscribing or signing up for email notifications at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/subscribe. The email notifications will give you a brief summary of each episode so that you can decide if you want to listen. Episodes are bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. When I graduated, my first job choice was to be an actuary, with working in tax as a close second. And even though I've enjoyed all my tax roles, it wasn't until I became CTA qualified that I decided tax was where I wanted to stay. With tax, there's so many different roles and places to work. They all provide something a bit different. And while that's great, it's meant I've spent a lot of time thinking about what areas of tax I want to work in and where I want to take my career long term. I've been caught up in my own thoughts. I've had doubts. I've been unsure. What's been most useful for me is talking to others, saying what I'm thinking, having someone listen, and hearing their advice. The tax recruitment company understands this and can help you with a free career coaching chat with them. They have over 6 years' experience in the sector. They can help you explore the options. They can help you decide what's best for you, and they can help you to create a plan to transform your tax career, making you feel more content and happier in your life. You can book a free, no obligation call with them by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/free career chat. That's thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/free career chat. Thanks to the tax recruitment company for sponsoring the podcast, which is helping me to continue creating episodes. Without further ado, let's get to the episode. Can you just tell us a little bit about you and your tax career?
Yeah, no worries. So I'm Kate Rothwell. I'm head of tax at AO.com. So the electrical online retailer, but we do so much more than that. And I've been here nearly 4 years in April. But I didn't start working in-house. I started in practice. I was part of the graduate programme at Grant Thornton, the Kettering office. I joined in September 2003. So nearly 20 years in tax. When you say that, blimey, that's a long time, isn't it? And I joined the corporate tax team. and I did my ATT and CTA within that team. It was a local office, so we provided tax advice to Northamptonshire, parts of Cambridgeshire, and I even went to Birmingham one time as well. That was interesting. And we primarily advised from really small owner managed businesses, small charities, all the way up to large multinationals. So a real breadth of different types of businesses, different industries, different characters. And as well as that, we used to prepare the P11Ds and the PSA. So a really broad kind of introduction into tax. Once I'd done my CTA, unfortunately, there was no local opportunities for me to get promoted. And although there were probably opportunities in London or Cambridge, that didn't really fit in with where I wanted to be and where I wanted to live. So we relocated to Manchester. And I applied for, to work with Big Four companies. I felt that I wanted the challenge of working within, really large corporate companies. And at the time, EY offered me a role, so I joined the team there. I kind of, jumped in feet first, really. And I started working on large corporates and, was offered the opportunity to join a centre of excellence for real estate and PFI clients with Graham Wright. And I learned a tremendous amount in that team. And by pure fluke, a role at Speedy Hire came up and I was contacted and asked, would I be interested in applying? And I'd always, whilst working at university, I'd worked in accounts departments in businesses, and I'd always really enjoyed being part of the business. You can really get your teeth into it. So when I was contacted about the role at Speedy, with it being, within the construction sector, with having the experience of like working within the real estate team, it felt like a really good fit. So I applied for it and was lucky enough to get the job. And that role was a solo in-house person role, so I was the only taxpayer person in it. I was the person before me that had looked after tax had been an interim tax manager and had been there for 6 months. So he'd come in, a guy called Mike Stott, and really good contact of mine now. He came in and set up the SAO, sorted out the tax reporting, and basically handed it over at that stage. So, but it was really about building processes around corporate tax reporting, employment tax reporting, refining the financial reporting. We expanded into the Middle East, so it was learning about tax in Oman and Egypt and working with advisors there. So it really was a baptism of fire. And you're the only one, kind of everyone expects you to know everything about tax, and let's be honest, you can't possibly know that. So it was around it was really around learning to manage people's expectations, learning on how to use advisors in the best way, because let's be honest, everyone only gets a small pot of money. So how do you use that money to make the most impact? So yeah, it was a great role. It was a great team, and I learned an awful lot. During that time, I went on maternity leave, and I had my 2 children. And when I came back from maternity leave, I felt like I needed a new challenge. I wanted something really to get my teeth into, and I was a bit nervous about returning to work and actually being the only tax person. So I felt a bit lonely. And a role at AstraZeneca came up, and AstraZeneca is a FTSE 100 FTSE top 10 company, and the team is really, really well respected in the Northwest. So I got the opportunity to join Helen Clegg's team in the tax operations team, and I jumped at it really. I worked with the team for a year, learned so much, really, it was really great to work with a lot of other, in-house tax professionals. And again, another opportunity presented itself at AMEC Foster Wheeler, now Wood Group, to join Andy McLean's team as Deputy Head of UK Tax, with the view that in a couple of years, when Tricia Duffy, who was the head of tax for the UK, retired, that I'd take over that role. So it was very much sold to me as a role that I would kind of come into and almost be groomed to take over. And I thought, this is perfect. The timing is exactly right. By the time, Tricia wants to retire, my children will be starting school. That's just when I want to go back to work full time. Yes, this is brilliant. It's going to give me the right challenge and the support as I go through. I'd been at AMEC for about 4 months. It was about Christmas time when I got called into a meeting room to say, actually, we want you to take the head of tax for the UK job after Christmas. Will that be okay? And I was like really panicked. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not ready. What am I going to do? But these opportunities don't come up. So I kind of just jumped in feet first and figured, well, they must think that I can do this, otherwise they wouldn't offer it. And actually, again, you're in that almost, you're with other heads of tax and you're working with really, good people. So I felt really supported. So I just went for it. Unfortunately, that my role was made redundant as part of the takeover when Wood took over at Foster Wheeler. And that's kind of led me to my role at AO and where I am now.
So as well as like your formal jobs and roles, I know that you do quite a lot of volunteering for different committees as well. And one of those is Women in Tax. Could you just tell us a little bit about that? And I suppose what your passion is for volunteering for that committee?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Women in Tax Manchester branch was something that Lisa O'Hare really kicked off pre-COVID, and then with COVID and other, the way of the world, Lisa handed it over to a group of us, but we just weren't able with COVID to kind of get it back up and running. And we took the opportunity really in September this year to kind of kickstart it. And the reason we did that was, for me, as someone who was really shy and really struggled with the confidence, having forums like that, networks, being able to see other senior women and how they've got to, where they've got to in their career. And, there's all different routes. It's really, really important. So for me, it's something that I'm really passionate about making sure, selfishly, for the people within my team at AO, that they get to see other female leaders, that they don't just think that, my route is the only route. There are lots of different ways to kind of progress and to develop yourself. And the other thing as well is we do an awful lot of work, and we talk an awful lot about, helping women, giving them opportunities when they return from maternity leave, helping them to manage their family. But I'm 40. I definitely don't feel I'm at the end of my professional career. But one of the things that's really surprised me was the lack of information and kind of conversation around the menopause and how the menopause can really affect women and their well-being. And the menopause can be a really, really positive change for women, but actually getting there can be incredibly grueling. I mean, I read a statistic today that it says that there's 1 million women in the UK that are thinking of leaving the workforce because of their menopause symptoms. And I just think that we do all of this work to kind of invest and encourage women, when they, go off on maternity leave, when they come back from maternity leave. And it almost feels that once they get just to the point of their career that they want to, that this natural thing that happens to all women has the ability to kind of take it away and come crashing down. And I just feel really passionate that we need to talk about it more. We need to normalize it, and we need to say, actually, it's something that happens to all of us. So how can we support women at that stage of their life as well? And that's something that, I'm not just passionate about in terms of like the Women in Tax branch, but it's also something that we do, we're trying to do a lot of work on at AO as well.
Yeah. It's, I suppose it's wrong really, isn't it? That I suppose there's not enough information out there for in relation to the menopause, so that I suppose the workplaces can accommodate for it. So I've heard stories in the past of people having like really hot flushes and needing to go outside, or feeling sick or tired or whatever it is. And it'll be nice, wouldn't it, for the workplace to be able to accommodate for those things so that women don't need to feel like they need to leave their job, kind of that stat that you just mentioned at the same time. Obviously, you had a bit of a career break then, I suppose, between having your children and working at AstraZeneca. I mean, how did you kind of transition back into that? Because it must be hard after having a few years off.
Yeah, so I had about 18 months off. The way that my maternity leave, it was a consecutive maternity leave. And it was really hard actually to come back. My confidence was quite low. You've been out of, working and talking with adults and technical people. I felt incredibly nervous going back to work, but then even more nervous starting a brand new role in a brand new team really as well. So there was a lot to kind of get my head round. But it was just such a fantastic opportunity. I just kind of jumped at it and hoped for the best, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose that's what you have to do when you, I suppose, get these opportunities. I mean, was that like the first job you'd applied for after maternity, or did you go through like a stage of, I suppose, searching for your job after maternity?
No, it was one. I wasn't really, to be honest with you, I wasn't really looking. But AstraZeneca is a really large tax team, well-renowned tax team. So even to get an interview, I was really kind of shocked. I suppose that's a bit of imposter syndrome coming in. So then to be offered the role was a confidence boost in itself, to be honest with you.
Yeah. How did you kind of, I suppose, deal with that transition and to kind of almost get your confidence that you needed and know that you were fine to go back into work and do a good job of it?
So I did go and preparing to come back and face the world of work and face the world of tax. So, I did I've kept up with like technical reading. Gosh, that sounds really boring, but it's the truth. And I just did it, I just really just got prepared, talk to the people and the team that I was going into and just immerse myself really in what I was going to do. I mean, I was quite lucky in a way that actually the role at AstraZeneca, although was a lot more specialised than what I'd done at Speedy Hire. So at Speedy Hire, I've been responsible for all taxes all over the world. So, UK taxes, territories in the Middle East. Whereas going into AstraZeneca, I was very much part of the corporate tax team, and I was responsible for elements of that corporate tax, return and function. So I suppose in a way it made going back a little bit easier because your focus was very, very targeted rather than having to kind of think, I need to think about everything. And also going back and being part of a team was really, really reassuring. It can be quite lonely working house on your own. You haven't got the ability to kind of turn round on your chair and ask a colleague a question or sense check something, because actually the people that you're in an office with when you're not part of a tax team sometimes don't know what you're talking about or don't appreciate the worry that you might have about something. So actually going back and being part of a tax team, I think really helped me when I returned from maternity leave.
Yeah, it's. I suppose I do get why it would be so hard to be there as like a lone tax professional, because you're the only one that knows the detail and you're the one that has to make a decision. So I suppose if you're wrong, you feel like it's on your shoulders, so it adds a bit of pressure onto you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the key though with that is being able to build a really good network of advisors, having go-to people that you can kind of sense check things with, not having the fear that you're gonna, every time you pick up the phone you're gonna get a fee for it, but also building I suppose an informal network of other in-house tax professionals as well that you can bounce ideas off of. I mean, one of the things that we're pretty good at in the Northwest is we've got an in-house tax forum. It's kind of where we kind of meet and we share ideas. We run a retail tax forum as well. So, and that's been really invaluable throughout COVID. We were meeting virtually, every 6 weeks, and just sharing not technical questions, but sharing our to-do list almost, if that makes sense, that everyone's facing the same challenges, and practically how do you get through them? Who are the best people to speak to? How did you navigate business cases, talking to your departments within your companies? And it's just sharing those practical tips, I think, that's really invaluable.
Yeah, I think probably a big difference, at least from what I can see, when you move in-house is, whilst obviously technical knowledge is important, actually you need to take such a more practical view than you might do if you were working for an accountancy firm or similar. So kind of, it's not just the tax outcome, you've also got to implement, I suppose, good processes and know what processes to even implement in the first place, and then actually go and do those things.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think part of the tax inevitably is only part of the answer, if that makes sense. So the tax technical answer is part of the solution. You then have to physically, implement it, sometimes sell it within the business as well, making people understand why it's important. That tax sometimes can be a positive part of the business. If you think about RDEC and the P&L benefit that can have when you've got an eligible claim, but a lot of times tax is seen as a cost and a defence and a compliance area. So actually, you kind of have to sell yourself and be able to explain why it's important that people do it. Why do we need to make the investment? It's, and I think sometimes people forget that, believe it or not, businesses don't operate, with tax in the forefront of their mind. It's not. Businesses are there to make money, and to, PLCs are there to deliver for shareholders. So decisions that are made, it's really hard sometimes to get a seat at the table when decisions are being made, especially when you're in a business that's growing and that hasn't had tax as part of its kind of infrastructure for years and years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think as tax professionals in like an accountancy firm, sometimes I think it's easy to think that like tax drives all the decisions in a business. And I think there's a saying something like, I'm going to get this probably completely wrong now, but tax doesn't wag the commercial dog or something along those lines. So like actually in reality, when it comes to businesses, tax is like a consequence rather than the thing that drives decisions, really.
Exactly. I think that's a really good way to summarize it. And I've been part of roundtable discussions with HMRC, and some of the questions they've asked around, you say we need to be more commercial. What does that mean? And it's exactly that point that you make, is actually businesses don't make strategic decisions for tax purposes. They make strategic decisions to make money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. So kind of outside of the practicality and the commerciality which working in-house has kind of taught you, is there anything else you think you've kind of learned that you wouldn't have working for an accountancy firm by working in-house, do you think?
I think one of the things that you really get to see when you work in-house is how important building a really solid foundation of compliance processes is. I think I can remember when I, was preparing tax computations when I was at EY and Grant Thornton, and you'd send off a list asking for what you thought was really, really basic information. But actually the process of getting that information is actually can be really, really complicated, because again, when a purchase ledger clerk puts in an invoice, they're not sitting there thinking, right, I need to put as much information in because Kate from tax needs to understand what their invoice is. Actually, that purchase ledger clerk is thinking, I need to get as many invoices on the system as quickly as possible to meet my own KPIs. And then your finance team are looking at the information. They're not looking at it in the same way. So actually, we've spent a lot of time working with our finance teams, kind of really building that the importance of why information is so key. More than ever, data is the key to everything. If we get good data, we can really supercharge our tax compliance processes. And if we haven't got that solid foundation of compliance processes, can't give the businesses a stable tax environment in which to grow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I kind of really like your point actually about like the finance team isn't really thinking about the information that's needed for tax purposes later. So I suppose the best example I've got from my work is when we're doing PSAs for clients, and they usually give us information straight out of the accounting software, specific ledger codes, and obviously there's usually very little information about what things are there. But it's kind of, as you say, really the reason that's the case is because the person who's coding those invoices up doesn't realise the importance of that information, and in any event, they probably have got different KPIs just to get as many invoices on as possible. So yeah, it does make sense.
But what I found what I found pretty early on from working in-house is actually to go back to that person and just explain what you need them to do, what information you need them to put on, or even just pulling an invoice to the side and keep it in a file for you. People will do that. People are really, really willing to help if you explain why you need it. I think sometimes, the tendency is just to ask, to kind of fire off email saying I need this, this and this without giving any people any context. I think if you give people the context, they understand the importance, and then you definitely see an increase in the quality of the information that you get. But all of that is investing time. And when you look at it, sitting with a finance team or a purchase ledger team to kind of talk them through the type of information and how you need the information, you wouldn't necessarily think, well, that's tax work, but actually that builds the foundation to allow you to do really, really good compliance. If you've got a good compliance process, you can then move on to adding the value, and that's business partnering with the business. So going out, talking to the business, being proactive. We don't, I think there's a misconception that when you work in house that basically you sit at your desk and everyone comes to you with all of their queries. It's really not like that. You have to go out into the business, you have to talk to people, you have to allow people to talk about their business, what they want to do, what they want to do in the future, and then off the back of that you can go away and think about the tax opportunities or how you're going to protect the company, or things that you're going to kind of advise them to do to then allow the business to kind of grow in that really stable manner.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's kind of, if I'm kind of following right anyway, I suppose really compliance is like the essential, isn't it? Every business needs to make sure that they do their compliance work from a tax perspective and submit that. But the advisory stuff and the more consultancy stuff is like almost a luxury. So before you move on to that, really, you need to get the compliance stuff in order. It sounds like that's what you're talking about, if I'm following.
Definitely, that's been my approach, is really, you have to have that solid foundation of compliance to build, to enable you to go out into the business and do the more proactive stuff. Because actually, if you're doing the proactive stuff, you're never going to get, everything ends up in a tax return ultimately, doesn't it? Or ends up in the accounts. And actually, you haven't got a process in which to get that stuff into your accounts or into your tax returns in a really solid, robust way, then you're going to fail really from the very beginning.
Yeah, well, information is the most important thing, isn't it? Because without the information,
Absolutely.
you can't figure out the tax consequence of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a reminder that you can book a free career coaching chat with the Tax Recruitment Company by heading on over to thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/free career chat. The Tax Recruitment Company can help you decide what's best for you and your career. So I kind of know from experience that there's a lot of tax professionals out there who are, I suppose, quite shy and sometimes struggle with confidence. And it's interesting, actually, because obviously when we chatted before this, you kind of mentioned that's one of the things that you found difficult yourself. And kind of a few times today, you kind of alluded to being nervous in interviews or going back into work or having imposter syndrome. So it's obviously something that's, I suppose, impacted you at certain stages in your career, but it obviously hasn't held you back at the same time because of the roles that you've managed to get. So could you just tell us a little bit about how shyness has played a role in your career, and I suppose also how you've learned to deal with it or compensate for this?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's absolutely. So, I remember graduating from university and being painfully shy, I think is the way that I would describe it. I'd go to graduate interviews, really wouldn't kind of sell myself, would close up very, very quickly. wouldn't really say the right words. I wouldn't articulate what I wanted to say. Luckily, Grant Thornton saw something in me, and as I said to you, were very, very patient when they interviewed me. I think because it was a local office, with a smaller tax team, you kind of got more of a, I suppose, a personal touch to the recruitment process. But definitely, I can remember especially in my early part of my training, being incredibly nervous. And I think I was really lucky just to work under some really, really great mentors and people that saw that shyness and kind of really encouraged me to kind of come out of myself, if that makes sense. I worked with can remember my first, on-site client visit that I went to on my own. And I remember arriving and nearly being in tears, and the audit in charge, Kathy, basically was like, it's all right, we'll get you a cup of tea, you're going to be able to do this. And it's just the kindness of others really that kind of really builds you up. And I think, once I got my exams under my belt and I got my CTA under my belt and I got the job at EY, it builds confidence. And every time that I do something that I think I can't possibly do this, and you do it, feels a little bit of more confidence. I mean, even doing this today, I don't find this sort of thing very easy at all. And I've been incredibly nervous about doing it. But again, I feel that you have to keep pushing yourself and challenging yourself. Otherwise, that shyness kind of takes over. So, I'm doing this. I've done, talks for the local tax institute branch. We've kick-started the Women in Tax branch again. So that involves me kind of chairing, planning, meetings. So it's all about pushing myself forward, enable, to I suppose to prove to myself that I can do it, and I shouldn't have that small voice in the back of my head telling me I can't.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, how nice of that audit person. So I think you said her name was Kathy. They kind of just encouraged you and made you feel like you could do it on that day. Those type of people, I think, are the type of people you want to be surrounded by.
And do you know what, Jack? I remember that, and I remember how I felt with that. So I've always tried to do that myself. Whenever you can always see when someone's slightly struggling or slightly nervous, is almost to give that kindness back. And I think the more that we do that as a profession, the wider our pool of people will be who work with us. Yeah,
no, agreed. And I think as well, kind of by the sound of it, then your approach is to always try and push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone so you can keep growing and stuff as well. And I think that's, I suppose, a good way to get better at any skill is push yourself a little bit further than what you're comfortable with. Because if you always stay in your comfort zone, I don't think you'll ever improve or get better at anything.
I think that's right. And I think it's perhaps even more important when you work in-house, because you haven't got that structure of kind of moving through the different levels that you have perhaps in practice. You have to take much more ownership of your own kind of development and career. And, sometimes it means doing things outside of your own company or group, so, and that's and doing things in your own time as well. But that's an investment that I think is important if you kind of want to develop and grow.
Yeah, agreed. I'd like to talk a little bit about work-life balance, because I think this is something that you've wanted for yourself, and I think it's something you've achieved. I remember when I had my first job in tax, and one of my first reviews I ever had, I had a comment that didn't really sit well with me at the time. So I was spending about 3 hours a day commuting back then, which is a long time. And I was also studying for my ATT exams. And one thing I've always prided myself on is being productive and efficient with my time. And that's exactly what I was doing back then. So when I got some feedback that basically said that me not kind of working late or staying in the office for a long time after hours could kind of have a negative impact on my progression. So I was pretty annoyed at that situation. So is there anything in particular that's driven you, think, to have your strong desire to get that work-life balance, and how have you gone about achieving it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel that as I said before, I've got two children. My children are 8 and 7, and I don't know where those years have gone. They've gone from being tiny babies to proper little people now. And I think sometimes when we talk about work-life balance, as parents, almost like you've got more of a right to that than people that don't have children. And it's something that I think about quite a lot, especially when I look across my current team, because not everyone in my team's got children. And why should people with families have priority over work-life balance than people that don't have that? And actually the pandemic has made us think a lot more about that itself. But for me, it took me having children to kind of really assess what was important. And I can remember missing my daughter's first dance show because I'd had to go to Aberdeen, and I didn't feel I could say no to that. But actually, on reflection, that is absolutely something that I should have tried to negotiate and do something about, because I can't ever get that back. And I think from that day, really, I've really tried hard to manage my workload, or manage my diary, so that I can be there for those important first, or those important dates that are important to my children, because you can't ever get that back. And your family is your family, your friends are your friends, and work's important. But I firmly believe that actually, if you give like 110% when you're in work, you should be able to have that balance and that time back with your family. So, I mean, I suppose it's easier the more senior you get, because you're able to, I suppose, command more, aren't you? But I think as senior leaders, it's really important for us to kind of respect the people that work for us and respect their kind of their work-life balance as well. So for me, how I've managed it, I've been just honest with the people that I've worked with. When I joined AO, I was really honest that I've got a family, and work-life balance is really important to me. So some days, I'm going to work odd hours because I might be at the school at 9 o'clock for a special award assembly, but I deliver. And I think having that reputation of being able to deliver and being confident when you say you're going to deliver is really important.
Yeah. I mean, you need like those life events really sometimes to really like spur the change. And it sounds like for you, it was when you missed your daughter's play that one time.
And look, don't get me wrong, I can't do everything, and my children have to understand that. And sometimes you can't manage it, and sometimes you do have to kind of take it on the chin. But I think for me, the key is that the majority of the time I am able to do that. But that's what's really important to me, that there are people, as I said, within my team who don't have children, but just because they don't have children, they might have events that are really, really important to them, and we have to respect that, I think. And I do think it is changing. I do think that if anything, COVID has taught us that people can be productive. People can be trusted, because let's be honest, that's what it's about, isn't it? And if you give people that trust, it gives them an empowerment, really. And I find within the team that you get a lot more back.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's an interesting comment you said actually about, as well, as kind of a senior leader, it's kind of important to help your own team get that work-life balance as well. It's something I think I've always tried to do with the people that I manage. Is I don't want them to ever have any pressure or feel like they need to work late. If they want to, because they want to help out on something and they feel like it's the right thing to do, fine with that. But I try to do as much as I can, at least, to prevent the need for them ever to work more than their core hours, if I can get away with it.
Yeah, I think that. And look, we've all worked on projects and we've all had emergencies, but working with a team that understand that, and understand that you might be asked to do extra hours, but it's in these really limited circumstances, or year-end reporting. We know that happens every year. We know the hours at that point are long, but knowing that you get that goodwill back in a different way, like going to a school play, for an example, before Christmas, it's all about give and take, and it's about communication, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a key thing, actually, give and take. It's not all about take. So if all you're expecting is to get the work-life balance that you want and never willing to give anything back, I don't think that's the right way to do it, is that you do need to give a little bit back, as you say, as well.
Well, we all work for businesses, don't we? Let's be honest. So absolutely, it has to be kind of across the year or the month, an equal balance between the two parties. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think we all go into a career in tax knowing that sometimes there will be a requirement for that, but I think it should be the exception and not the norm to have to overwork. Is there a particular piece of advice that you've received in your tax career that's kind of stood out and stuck with you that you could tell us a little bit about?
I suppose I can remember once being told that I was too nice, and I chuckle at that. But I'm okay with that. I am who I am. I think that I think there are worse things than being too nice and too open with people. I've found my own way to succeed and kind of move my career on, and I suppose to find the balance and the challenges that I want, if I'm honest with you. And it might not have been a traditional route for how I've got here, but I have got here.
Yeah, I think that's nice to know that you kind of, by the sounds of it, almost like stood by your own values and what you believe and operated in the way that you wanted, and were still able to achieve what you have done. So it goes to show you don't need to, I suppose, work outside of your values and stuff. You can still do. You just got to find the way to do it. Almost.
I think so, and I think it's really important to be true to yourself, because I can't imagine how much energy you people must spend pretending to be something that they're not. And actually, well, I definitely, when we're working with advisors, I'm not looking for a carbon copy of me. I'm looking for someone that's got a different, unique, perspective on something, someone that's going to bring something different to the table. And I think that's so invaluable. That actually, and I think that's really important, and you definitely see in that shift, I think, with people being more confident to be themselves rather than what they think people want to see and want to hear.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, don't get me wrong, there's a balance between, I suppose, not showing like yourself that you would act like in a nightclub or partying when you're like 18 or something at work, but it's, I suppose, still acting like yourself at all times, and maybe almost reining in some things if it's completely not appropriate for a work environment.
No, but that's the key, isn't it? It's about being yourself in a professional way. So, I would have, as an example, I'm forever getting told off for offering to make people drinks. Everyone should make their own drinks type thing, but I'm going to make everyone a drink. I'm polite. That's what we do. That's what I was taught to do. So it's, when I say be yourself, I think it's more about, being true to who you are. I suppose I like being a nice person, and that's who I am.
Yeah. And I think that comes through with everything you've said today as well, Kate.
I hope
so. Well, you've done something. I suppose something's gone wrong if it hasn't come across like that today. So kind of looking back then now, knowing what you know now, if you were to give your younger self some career advice, what do you think it would be?
I suppose we've kind of touched on this. I would say trust that it's okay to be yourself, trust in your abilities, and have confidence in what you know. I wish I'd have had more confidence. I wish I hadn't worried so much about not being good enough, if that makes sense. And not worrying what other people thought as well. I think that we grow up in an age really where there's an awful lot, isn't there, of like social media and perception, and especially when you I suppose come through a practice route, with this competition, isn't there, with other trainees, and who's going to get the best job, who's going to get to work with that partner, who's going to get to work on that project. So that when I look back, that worry caused a lot of worry, and I wish we shouldn't have spent so much energy worrying about it, if I'm honest with you. So I'd say worry less and just, I suppose, enjoy the now, and also, I suppose, stop looking for the next thing, because you're always like, I want to get to the next level. We're always almost told we need to push to be, you're a senior associate, you should be aiming for manager. You're a manager, you should be aiming for senior manager. Not everyone wants to do that, and that should be okay in my book.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think actually when I first started out in tax, I didn't really understand that people might not want to be promoted or might not want to continue developing the career. I suppose it's only now with a bit more life experience. I'm saying this as a 27-year-old. It's not like I've got that much in reality, but I can now understand how people have different priorities in life. And if not wanting a promotion or not wanting to aim for the next job isn't their thing, I think that's completely fine. And usually you can get someone, let's say, who's a manager that doesn't want to be a senior manager. They could be an absolutely great manager and an absolute asset to the team and organisation that they work for.
Absolutely.
So for people who do want to improve, progress and develop their own tax career and I suppose get what they want as success for them, what would you say are your top 3 tips?
I think mine's really simple, and I think I've said this before, but it's about being bold. It's about being brave, taking that next step, even if you're unsure. And above everything, it's just really important to be kind. I think, kindness is a trait, is a skill that's sometimes massively overlooked. Here at AO, we've got 2 sayings that really, really kind of, resonate with me. And one is that, we treat every customer like our gran. So we treat everyone like we would our gran. And if you think my customers aren't just AO customers, it's the whole of the AO infrastructure. That's who we, provide a service to. And the other one is that, we make decisions that make our mum proud. And I lost my mum. It was 11 years ago when she passed away, and I think that's another thing that's kind of really, I suppose, helps you reevaluate life and what's important when you talk about work-life balance. And so those kind of 2 key core principles are really, really important. And I know they sound a bit gimmicky, but for me, they're really key.
Yeah, I kind of like that. It's almost having like a voice in your head that's almost guiding you in the decisions that you make day to day. About like, would this make my mom proud, or how would I deal with this with my gran? They're kind of nice ways to do that, aren't they?
Yeah. So
if people want to learn a little bit more about you, Kate, where's the best place for them to go?
I think I've got a LinkedIn page, and I'm happy to connect with people. Just send us a message on LinkedIn. For me, the tax community is really, really small, and yeah, I'm always happy to have a chat with anyone, as you know, Jack.
Yeah, if I can get Kate on a podcast, she'll definitely have a chat with you. Head to the show notes for this episode to find out more information about Kate, a link to Kate's LinkedIn, and also links. Head to the show notes for this episode to find out further information about Kate, a link to Kate's LinkedIn profile, and also for the links mentioned within this episode, including a link to all other episodes of Tax Career Success Secrets. You can access the show notes at thetaxprofessionalspodcast.com/TTPP48. If you enjoy this episode, subscribe or sign up for email notifications to make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes. The emails will give you a brief summary of each episode. Episodes are bi-weekly and are released on Mondays. But that's it for this episode. I hope you liked the episode and have taken away some useful points to help you to progress, develop and improve your tax career. Until next time.